Hello and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Sally Duplantier. I am the host of Wellness Wednesday, and I am also the founder of Zing. And I have a mission, which is to help older adults live their best lives longer. And today's topic is one that's near and dear to my heart because it's about how we can age in place with purpose and rethink community and connection in later life. And I'm so excited. It's also our first panel presentation. Before we officially get started with the program, let me thank a few partners. So these are our promoting partners. These are all the different organizations that help spread the word to the community to tell people about Wellness Wednesday. So thank you. And then a shout out to our community supporters. As I say every time, these programs are free to anyone who wants to attend, but they're not exactly free. So we thank our community supporters to provide funding to help make these programs available. Thank you so much. And now meet our panel. As I said, we've never done a panel presentation before, but I am so excited to welcome my guests. Sue Eldridge is the Executive Director of the Villages of San Mateo County. Welcome, Sue. And Erica Thomas is the Director of Avenidas Village in Palo Alto. And Chuck Seeloff is part of the Avenidas Village leadership team in Palo Alto. So thank you all for being here. And before we get started, Chuck is going to share some slides, and then Sue and Eric and I are going to do some Q&A. If you have questions as we go, type them into the Q&A. We'll allow about 10 minutes at the end. And if you don't see a Q&A button on your Zoom controls, you'll probably see three little dots, so you can use those. If you have trouble hearing, you can enable closed captions. And then later this afternoon, I will send a link to the recording and a lot of additional resources. So with that, welcome, Chuck. I'd like to go ahead
Right.
and turn this over to you.
Okay, let me just share my screen to start
Sure.
off. There we go. I hope everyone is seeing that all right. I'd just like to start, I guess, with talking a little bit of the background about why we're so concerned about aging in place and the related issue of longevity, which is getting a lot of public interest these days. The fact is, the U.S. is about two-thirds of the way through a dramatic change in the demographic profile of the country. Today, we have 58 million people who are over 65, and another 10,000 join them every day. By 2030, when the last of the baby boomers hit 65, there'll be 64 million seniors in the country. And what was really interesting to me by 2034, for the first time in our history, we will have more seniors over 65 than we have children under 18. So that's really a major change in the society. Today we have about 18% over 65, and we're headed to 20 to 22% in the future. And one of the things we talk about aging in place at home, 30% of the households in the U.S. are headed by a senior. So, this is a chart that really helps kind of visualize the changes that are occurring. You see, this is from the U.S. Census Bureau, and it shows the demographic profile of the country in 1960 and the projected profile in 2060. And these horizontal bars all represent 5-year cohorts of the population. So you can see what percentage, what proportion of the population lies in each of those 5-year cohorts. So you can see some historic things here, like the reduced birth rates in the Depression and World War II, the baby boomer period coming after World War II. But the really striking thing I think about this chart is comparing the overall demographic structure of society. So if you look at the column on the right, represents a total population. It's a little more twice the size of the total population on the left. But you look down at the youngest kids in that population, And the two are almost identical. So we today have, and in the future, we'll have about the same number of kids in the society as we had in 1960. But look at the top, and you see a dramatic change where in 1960 there were really very few, a much lower proportion of the population made it through into their 70s and beyond, whereas now we see a much more even distribution of the age segments throughout the population. So that's a big change, and it has lots of implications for society. Um, just as a quick example, when Social Security was introduced, we had 8 workers for every recipient of Social Security. Today, we have about 3 workers for every recipient of Social Security, and we're headed towards something closer to 2. And if you look at some other countries like Japan or many European countries, they're already there. They already have this very much age-heavy demographic profile. So, what I really would like to focus on is where are these people going to live? How are they going to live in their later years? If you ask the seniors themselves, the answer is pretty clear. 80 to 90% of them say they want to stay in their own home. And most of them expect that to be the home they're currently in. They're not expecting to change locations, to change houses, and they see the path that they're on as a continuation of the path that they've always been on. But realistically, it's not. Looking back, over what worked for you over the last 20 or 30 years in your home may not be the same thing you're going to need looking forward to the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so I think one of the main points of today is to realize that at some point, aging in place needs to become a conscious strategy. And we need to be looking forward rather than backward to accommodate those changes. There's a group in the US called the National Aging in Place Council that I would bet most of you have never heard of, but it has addressed these issues. And they've identified five pillars of aging. And we're just going to take a brief look at each one of those and how they relate to aging in place. So, housing, health and wellness, personal finance, transportation, and social connectivity. So, let's start with housing. 80%, 90% of the people say they want to stay in their current home. But the Census Bureau figures show that only 10% of those older adult homes meet what are considered to be the minimum requirements for elderly living today. So that's things like a step-free entryway, bedroom and bathroom on the first floor, bathroom accessibility features, those kinds of things. For a lot of people, you can accommodate these requirements with relatively small changes, relatively cheap accommodations. In other cases, particularly if you have a multi-story house and the bedrooms on a different and the bedroom and bathrooms on a different floor, you may have to go through some major renovations and some major expenses to prepare that house for what you're going to need going forward over the next 10 or 20 years. So that's something to really consider and a major factor in whether you're going to be able to age in place. Health and wellness, this statistic at the top there really surprised me when I first saw it, that it's estimated that 90% of us over 65 experience one or more chronic conditions that require some special attention or treatment. Not necessarily that it's life-threatening or really changing your life, but they require attention. And 60% of us have 2 or more of those kinds of conditions. And I think one of the things with the healthcare system is it tends to be focused on treating temporary conditions with specialist care. And one of the things I think as we face older age is that we need more of a shift from treating temporary conditions to managing the coexistence of multiple conditions. And that's something that, geriatric specialists are very good at, but we have very few of those in our healthcare system. So it's one of the things that causes problems as we look ahead to the future. The other thing that can really cause some health and wellness issues are injuries, and primarily for older adults, that's about falls. So, 1 in 3 older adults will fall this year. And less than half of those are actually reported formally, but it's something that really affects the ability to age gracefully, to age in place, to age to have a good health span as opposed to just a lifespan. Personal finance, obviously this varies a lot with individual circumstances, but it's interesting that half of Americans have really no retirement savings of their own beyond Social Security and maybe a pension from their company or from their union. They don't have a reservoir of savings that they can bank on for the future stages of their life. Those that do average a couple 100,000, which may or may not be enough to get you through, 20-year, 25-year period after your working life has passed. So I think one of the things that to me is that there's a need, pretty much universal need for what I call longevity planning. And longevity planning is simply, don't outlive your resources. You have to plan for different scenarios. You have to plan ahead to anticipate the fact that if you're a couple living in home, maybe one of you will get sick, maybe both of you will get sick, maybe one of you will need special accommodations. You need to plan that those things can happen and not just assume that things are going to continue as they always have been. The other thing is the rules keep changing. The government rules, the policy rules, you have to hedge your bets against some of those kinds of changes. So, in my lifetime, the estate tax exemption on inheritances went from $600,000 and a tax rate of 55% to today's $14 million and a 40% tax rate. That's a major change. And yet, if the presidential election had come out differently, there was already a law in the books that would have restored that 14 million back to its previous 7 million, so half as much as it is today. So you have to be able to plan against those kinds of changes. In just the last few years, the rules about how individual retirement accounts can be inherited and how that money can be spent by your heirs has changed dramatically. So really, you have to constantly be aware of the fact that things that you took for granted when you were thinking you were making long-term retirement decisions, investment decisions, those investment decisions can change as policies change. And then, you may want to consider some unconventional alternatives that are more geared towards unpredictable lifespans. So, reverse mortgages, home equity lines of credit, annuities, those are all things that instead of consuming your savings pool, can actually stretch your savings and can accommodate longer lifespans that you maybe didn't anticipate. And then finally, if you've owned your home for several decades, you probably really need to think about how you're going to use your biggest asset wisely. Um, Selling a long held home, depending on where you live, what state you live, and real estate values and things like that, can trigger major costs that will affect your ability to support yourself going forward. So everything from capital gains taxes to property tax changes, if you're moving from your own home into a retirement facility, monthly living expenses can dramatically change. So really, you have to really carefully plan how you're going to deploy that biggest asset that you have. And I guess the bottom line on this is that you really, even though you may think you have a plan in place with savings and all that, you really need to review that plan probably every 5 years or so to make sure that you're keeping up with all the latest changes that are going on around you. Transportation, another pillar. This is a big deal for older adults. One in five over 65s no longer drive at all. We have 41 million senior licensed drivers, and many of them deal with gradual kinds of deterioration and changes in vision, hearing, reflexes, things that affect the safety of their ability to drive. But for a lot of people, driving is really a core thing related to their independence. And so I think often we see that this is one of the hardest single decisions for a senior to make is when to put the keys down, when to take the keys away from a loved one, perhaps, and figure out a different way to deal with transportation. We have options today that are much more flexible than they used to be 5 or 10 years ago. But even with those options, I think this is an area where living in a supportive community can really provide you with some alternatives that make that easier to deal with. And then finally, the thing that is often overlooked is the importance of social connectivity. It turns out that the very best predictor of successful aging is ties to the community and social connectivity. Social isolation and loneliness are major health risk factors, even though we tend not to think of them that way. They can increase the risk of premature death by up to 50%. The risks associated with isolation and loneliness are comparable to the very commonly known risks associated with high blood pressure, obesity, smoking the equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day. And yet we tend not to take it that seriously and to not view that as part of our health planning. It needs more than just two or three good friends that you can count on being there every day. Really, what the evidence shows is that joining groups with shared interests and getting involved in community activities can really improve survival rates and reduce the risk of future depression by 25%. So this is a big deal, this whole social connectivity issue. I guess now we briefly looked at those five pillars. You might take a moment for yourself to just think, not looking backwards, but looking forward. How many of those five pillars do you think you have in place that will meet your needs going forward for the next 10, 15, 20 years? It's something that you can think about. There are alternative approaches certainly to aging in place in your own home. Um, the traditional approach was often multi-generational homes. This was a pretty common solution when there were lots more children and lots fewer grandparents. So when multi-generational home meant, you had maybe one grandmother who had 4 or 5 years left of her life and would spend that with one of her children in their home. That traditional approach, although it's culturally still important in some areas, it doesn't work very well when you have so many more grandchildren and so many fewer kids, and the burden becomes very different when those grandparents are living 10, 20 years beyond their normal working life. So that traditional model is not going to stand up very well to the current demographic change we're going through. One of the better known alternatives is age segregated facilities like retirement homes, continuing care retirement communities. This is a very good fit for some people because it is purpose designed to meet a lot of the problems we just reviewed with those pillars of aging. But it is expensive and it's hard to scale, mainly because these are purpose-built facilities. They don't take advantage of the existing stock of houses. Just to put some numbers behind that, we have a couple thousand of these CCRCs around the country, serving about 600,000 people. That sounds like a lot, but it's only about 2% of the people over 70 in the country. So this is a good solution for some people, but it's not a solution that's gonna fix society's issues with this demographic change. A somewhat related alternative is age segregated communities. We see these particularly in Sunbelt states and milder climate states as places where buyers of homes, they're buying their own homes, but they're restricted in age, maybe to be over 50, 55, or 60. And many people find that a very agreeable way of establishing a new community to live in. It obviously doesn't meet the need that they expressed originally of living in their own homes. It means you're uprooting, you're selling your home and moving into a purpose-built community again. But it can meet a lot of those needs that we've identified as you age. So this is definitely a solution for some people to consider. Another one that I haven't seen much attention given to, but I have seen examples in Florida, for example, where you can live as an older adult in an existing apartment or condominium community and then pay for concierge level services to be delivered within that existing community. So this concierge level service might be things like transportation assistance, meal delivery, medicine delivery, things like that. So it's adding a layer, but it's not purpose-built special housing for that population. I think this has a lot of potential, especially in states that have high proportions of older adults that have perhaps relocated from other areas and don't have a long-standing family home, but want to live in their own independent way. So these are all alternatives that are realistic approaches. But I would like now to kind of focus in on what we've been calling the village model. And this does not mean that these other approaches won't work for specific people, but the point is the magnitude of the demographic shift that we're facing is just going to require new approaches and new ways of thinking about the problem. And the way I like to look at it is, for society, for the broad-based needs of society, we need some solutions that are cost-effective, sustainable, and scalable. And this year we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of what we call the Village Movement, which started in a Boston neighborhood called Beacon Hill. And they started this as a really unique kind of organizational form 25 years ago, where neighbors decided that they wanted to stay. They liked the neighborhood, they want to stay in their homes, but they needed more support. They needed more access to resources. They needed to formalize that. They couldn't just rely on, the neighbor helping hand. They needed an organizational structure that could deliver those kinds of services and meet those kinds of needs. And so that's where the village movement actually got its first start. So, what is this thing we call a village? It's not a place to live. I hope you understand now. It really is a community-based, nonprofit, grassroots organization that is specifically designed to help older adults age in place in their own homes while staying connected to their own traditional communities where they've been for many years. This has expanded a lot from that original Beacon Hill village. There are currently over 300 villages nationwide, serving about 50,000 members. It's a loosely connected network. They're really independent, but they share a philosophy. They share information with each other. But there are a wide variety of shapes and sizes that are adapted to local needs. In the next section of this session, you'll be going into much more detail with two villages that happen to be neighboring, but are also quite different in the way they're organized. So you'll get a chance to see a little bit more detail about what this village concept means. But in terms of our three criteria that we mentioned, this is really a cost-effective solution, mainly because it uses existing housing. It doesn't require purpose-built housing for 20% of our population. It's sustainable in that it's built on local communities that already exist, that already have ties and identities, and you can build on top of that a little bit of an additional structure and formal structure to make that very sustainable. And it's scalable. This model can take lots of different forms, but it can be replicated locally. So as we see, it has in fact been replicated across the country in these 300 villages. Uh, this map shows the distribution of those villages. The yellow dots are clusters of more than 10 villages. The blue dots are clusters of fewer than 10 villages, and then there are individual villages around. But basically, this is the distribution. You'll see it's got a little bit of a coastal bias and a little bit of a sunbelt bias in terms of where those villages are located. But almost every major population center in the country has access to villages and is fairly near villages. The village model has been recognized by the state of California as a leading best practice for healthy and vibrant aging. There are lots of resources out there if you're interested in learning more about villages, in addition to what you'll learn later this session. One thing you might want to look at this list of resources, by the way, which Sally will be sending out to all the attendees, so you'll all have access to this. One, if you're interested in exploring local resources, you might want to look at that second one, the Village to Village Network. And all you have to do is go to that website and put in your zip code, and you can find the closest village to where you want to be. So that's something that you can pursue on your own. I guess I'd like to leave you with this from the network website that kind of sums up the role that villages have been playing. You know, as our population ages and the demand for community-based solutions continues to grow, villages are demonstrating that aging in place is about far more than remaining at home. It's about living with purpose, dignity, independence, and meaningful human connection. So that's really what this program is about, communicating and giving an impression to you about. I'd like to just leave you with one final thought that, you know, according to the National Aging in Place Council, older adults will spend more time planning their next vacation than they will making aging in place a sustainable option. So as you think about and look at some of this additional information, keep that in mind and maybe rebalance some of your priorities and thinking ahead for the next stages. So, Sally,
This was amazing, Chuck. And, we've gone through the slides many times, but you really made them hit home. And a lot of people are asking for a PDF of the slides. So perhaps I could share that as well as
okay.
the links. So I am so excited now to welcome two village leaders, Erica Thomas and Sue Eldridge, and we're just going to have a conversation. I have some questions to ask them, and then at the end, for about like 10 minutes, you can ask questions as well. This has just been eye-opening. But I think for a lot of us in the audience, it's like, well, like, wait, what is a village? Like, how does it work? So I'm going to start with Sue. And Sue, I'm going to let's pretend I've never heard of a village. And you're in San Mateo, right? Is
Yes,
that your
yes,
geography? So we pick a coffee shop in San Mateo. I come and meet you. We sit down. I've got my cappuccino, and I say, just tell me like what a village is. How would you describe it? Again, given that you and Erica might have slightly different versions of this because every village is a little different.
great. So, our village is really a community of older people coming together to age together, both with joy and with confidence. And we focus on the social connections of community and then providing practical support to maintain your independence and age in your own home. Although some of our members age into other senior living options and still are part of our community. We have villagers that range from age 60 to 102. We have 7 centenarians, kind of amazing. Everything we do is volunteer powered. We have about 400 volunteers, mostly retired, that lead and organize all of our social events and the practical supports we offer. So there are kind of three buckets of what you get when you join our villages. One is all sorts of social connections that help keep you active and engaged, and lots of friendship comes out of that. And then we have lots of practical supports that help our villagers maintain their independence and stay in their homes as long as that makes sense. Um, so uh, what I want to do is just quickly give you I'm going to talk just a little longer so I can paint the picture.
Yeah, that's
Answers
fine.
will be shorter. But let me give you a snapshot of these three buckets that I mentioned. I'd also say that everything that we do is relational. It's about relationships and connection. And that's just central to our villages. So To stay active and engaged, we have all sorts of activities, excursions around the Bay Area, meals together, happy hours, walks, robust speakers series, music gatherings, and lots of interest groups, special interest groups that are a little more intimate that our villagers lead to come together regularly and connect with other people with the same interest. Um, so we people join our villages when their worlds are shrinking. They may be older, they've lost a partner and friends, and they're looking for new community. We also have a lot of recently retired people who have more time on their hands. They want to meet new people. They want to stay active, and they also want to give back. So part of belonging to a village is both, you know, reaping the benefits of all we have to offer, but it's also volunteering and finding purpose in doing that. Um, we provide a large number of supports when somebody needs extra help in their home. About 65% of our villagers don't drive anymore. Average age is 83. So transportation is huge. Last year, we provided over 5,000 rides. So rides to shopping, to do errands, to our social events. About half of our rides are to medical appointments, and we also can help accompany somebody into a medical appointment. Um, we have a whole crew of handy people that will come in and do home safety evaluations and help with safety improvements like grab bars and rails, annual safety checks, and small home improvement tasks that are needed. About 60% of our members don't, they live alone. So lots of friendly visits and calls, tech support. It's kind of endless, the different ways that we lend a helping hand. I would say, though, when we ask our villagers, what does this mean to you? They will say without fail that the connection with those volunteers that they become friends with are as important as the actual support they receive. So lastly, we provide resource to help people think about navigating age transitions. So there are monthly village conversations and health forums that help people really anticipate what might lay ahead. And that's important because you want to stay in charge as much as you can and be able to think through decisions you might make. A lot of this stuff is scary. And so this is, a place with mutual support where we bring in expert speakers and you can think about different things that may lay ahead. We also have a care resource team, and that resource team reaches out when somebody's had a health crisis or their health is declining, something's changed in their life. To be sure all of our resources are wrapped around you, provide community referrals, and we often work with families to kind of partner to provide more care. So that's our village in a nutshell.
So this is very interesting. I want to get to Erica, but just a quick question. So if I were part of your village, I would pay an annual membership fee. Am I right with that? I'd pay a fee.
Yes, we ask our villagers that can to provide an annual contribution, and that's $600 a year for full service. We also have social memberships that are $300, and then their household. But we're inclusive, so we have all sorts of discounted memberships in a sliding scale. So we don't turn anybody away. We
Yeah.
just we ask those that can
Yeah.
to help support us.
And I think it's really interesting that your model is mostly volunteer. That's the model I first was introduced to with a village in Glen Ellen, Illinois. And so if somebody were to come and help, I don't know, install grab bars or make my house safer for me, would it be a volunteer? Like who's doing that work? It's somebody
It's
in the
all
community.
volunteer and all of our social events as well. I mean, everything we do is volunteer driven. So we have folks that come together to make all of, the excursions and meals and speaking, all of that. It's all volunteer driven for us. We have a very teeny staff team that leverages that
Thank you.
volunteers.
Thanks. Well, that was a good coffee date. Now I'm going to go to Palo
It
Alto
is a
and
long
I'm
one.
going to have coffee with Erica. So tell us about your village. Again, pretend I don't know anything. Pretend I haven't talked to Sue.
Oh, no.
Tell me about your village. How does it work?
Well, I would say that we're going to have to refer back to Sue because she gave a very good
That's
overview of
okay.
what almost all villages offer in some form.
Yeah.
And so even if it doesn't come, if it's not delivered in the same way exactly, almost all villages are focusing on those different areas of socialization, practical resources, and making sure people feel connected to a community who are all aging along the same journey. And so here in our community, we have a different set of demographics. We're more suburban.
You're
And
in
we
Palo
actually,
Alto, correct?
yes.
Palo Alto,
And
California.
yes. And we actually have found that we have not had as much of a need for some of the services that Sue's Village has mentioned. We do have people who need transportation. We do have people who need some practical support in their homes, but the proportion of those people is quite a bit lower. So what we found has been effective in our village is to make sure that we're able to connect people with local resources that are available that they can easily access and that we can often offer discounts from regular fees for such things. One of the things that didn't come up that Sue probably has is a list of vendors or service providers. And this is something that we've created by receiving recommendations for people who have given good service to seniors who have been trusted. And then we actually put them through a screening process of our own. And then we compile this list, which we make available to the members. So anytime they do need a service in their home, they can easily go to their list of village vendors and find somebody that they feel is going to be reliable and trusted. And we have a review system so that we keep them accountable as well. And really, we kind of, as a sort of a larger focus, we want the village to be the one place that any member can call and get an answer to the question or the need that they have.
Yeah, I mean, this is invaluable. Give me an example of what like one or two of those vendors might be. Just,
Well, the whole range of home repairs and home
yeah,
services. So if somebody needs a plumber, electrician, gutters cleaned, they can go to that list and see who we have on the list for those types of help. We also have lists of home care agencies who are active in the area. Again, these are ones that have been used typically by our members so that we have an actual experience to refer to because there's so many home care agencies out there. And so when you suddenly have this need, it's really hard to narrow it down. So we've tried to make that easier. And then other types of services, financial advisors, pet sitters, all kinds of different things.
yeah. So this is great. And then Erica, yours is you have a staff of people because you've been saying you have a staff. So your model's a little bit different. It's not volunteer, it's staffed, correct?
Yes, we have two full-time staff and one part-time.
Okay,
I'm
so
one of
it's
the
not
full-time.
staff, it's staff.
It's still small staff. But I think the difference that we're seeing is that we also are a partner. We belong to a larger agency which provides senior services. And that agency is able to provide a lot of the things that volunteers would be doing for the San Mateo villages.
Yeah. So Erica and Chuck are part of Avenidas, which is an amazing senior facility in Palo Alto. I know Chuck because I'm a guest speaker at Avenidas frequently. It's wonderful. So you're saying, Erica, that with your model, your members have access to Avenidas and all of its services as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we have a whole list of questions, but I'm going to throw one at you guys that you're not expecting. Are you ready for this? I'll start with Sue and then I'll go to Erica. Let's pretend I'm one of your village members, okay? And I have an accident, and this really happened. I'm kind of looking over at my leg because my leg is propped up because I fell this weekend. I was hiking, I fell, I twisted my ankle, and sure enough, it's broken. So now I'm sitting here with a broken ankle in a boot. I have to get to the doctor. My dog, my dear, wonderful, sweet dog is sick. We've got to get to the vet. Um, I don't know. I think I can order groceries, but it's like getting them in, trying not to be weight bearing. So now help me out here. Sue, if I were part of your village now, who do I call? What would I do? How would you help me?
So you'd probably reach out to another villager who is a friend. You might reach out to a volunteer. We have volunteers that are available by phone. We have an office and they take shifts. So you might call and say, this happened. I can really use a ride, um, a visit, whatever it might be. I need some safety adaptations made.
Yeah.
And so we'd respond in that way. And then I mentioned our care resource team. When something like that happens, the care resource team of volunteers would jump into action and somebody would call and visit and kind of do a more formal little A assessment of what you need.
Yeah.
And just be sure that that's in place. We might reach out to family and see what they're providing and how we can
Yeah.
complement. So
And I think what's interesting here is that, in my community, there's people I could call, of course, and I do have a husband. I
sure.
could, enlist him. But like sometimes we just don't, we don't feel as connected to people. And so it sounds like to me, part of the benefit of being part of a village is you really start to feel that connection to the people around you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the trust that,
Yeah.
whatever needs come up,
Yeah.
we're here to help you navigate
Yeah.
that, do what we can.
How about Erica? Anything you'd want to add there?
Sure. Well, I certainly would agree that sort of having the structure of the village makes it easier for people to reach out when they have a need, rather than just saying, oh, I should try to call my neighbor or something like that. They know they have something that they can call and that they can actually reach out to for support and feel comfortable doing that and not hesitant, hopefully. Um, I think that in your situation, we have a little bit of a different geographical setup to the San Mateo villages because they're three separate villages all under one umbrella of administration, as I understand it. Whereas we are one large village, but we've divided our membership into neighborhood groupings within the boundaries. And so if somebody called me with the needs like you have, the first thing I would do is try to get a sense of what they need. And then I would try to connect them with the leader of their particular neighborhood group, because within that group, there would be volunteers who would be able to help with the dog, who would be able to maybe help with a ride. And we would keep it kind of localized to that general area so that
Yeah.
people know who needs the help and how they can best help them.
Yeah. What's fascinating with, again, to me, is that even though one is a paid staff model, one is volunteer, it's all really about relying on one another and helping
Yeah.
one another, isn't it? Yeah. So who is the village designed for? So I'm 73. Is it, and I really was pretty active until this ankle, and I'll be back there again. But is it designed for people who are like getting a lot older and, are nervous about living at home alone? Is it about, people who are active seniors? Erica, you first and then Sue. Who joins your village?
Wow. Well, it covers the whole range because it's designed for people who want to contribute, and it's also designed for people who are starting to feel less confident about what they can do for
Yeah.
themselves. And so we see people who come in feeling often they will say, "Oh, I've got friends, I've got everything I need, but I just kind of want to be ready for what may be coming in the future." So we have a lot of those. But then we also see many people join after some kind of life event. And that could be the loss of a spouse. It could be simply all my friends are moving away, all my adult children are moving away. So kind of the support that they felt that they had has kind of gone away. And that's a time that they would identify the village as an option for maintaining that.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are asking all about, hey, is there one here? Is there one there? I promise I'm going to be
We'll
sending
tell
you a
you.
resource list. Sue, again, who joins?
Well, I think Erica really described the whole range. I mean, all our members join at all ages and stages of their life. And, we meet their needs in different ways,
Mhm.
um, and at different times. What I'd also say, though, is that, there's the social connection and, somebody lending practical support, all those resources. But, we really describe community as two parts of a whole. One is feeling known and connected and belonging. The other part is purpose driven. You matter and you contribute. So, you know, I sometimes talk about villagers or members and volunteers, but they're all one and the same as long as people have the ability to give back. So there's really that element too, and people come to that. They may be newly retired, and they're looking for ways to give back and be part of a community. They may have lost a spouse, and then there are a whole other set of needs. But
Yeah. Yeah. And this comes through loud and clear to me. Like I can already see being part of a village and being able to contribute also. So let's pretend that I joined your village, Sue. Let's assume geographically I live in a place that could be served by one of your villages. What's my first month look like? Like I talk to you, we have the coffee, I pay my dues. Like what do I do then?
yeah, well, what I would say is about 60% of both those that want to volunteer or become members uh, come through the door of a friend or somebody they know.
Yeah.
But we do outreach in lots of different ways. So I'll just start back. You're interested in joining a village, you give us your contact information. Somebody will call you, a volunteer, pretty immediately and talk with you about what you're looking for and what we have to offer. And if you want to join, then somebody to go and meet with you in person, you know,
Mhm.
come to your home or whatever it might be. And be sure you understand the whole range of resources and then help with some simple paperwork. Once you join, some people jump in, they sign up to come to a lunch or a speaker's event. Some people are tentative, and even when you need some of those practical supports, they may be tentative to ask to call our office and set something up. So there's a team that mentors new members, and
Oh,
they'll reach out, and it's very typical. Somebody will say, we've got this lunch happening or a music gathering. Can I pick you up and take you? So it kind of eases you into the community.
yeah.
And then we also, these are member engagement teams at each of the villages. We also watch when, someone may sort of disappear, and we'll call to see what's
Mhm.
going on. And, so a lot of connection and
Yeah.
very inviting.
Yeah, this is great to hear. Erica, I'm going to ask you a different one because I'm watching our time. I want to give our audience time to ask some questions. But, let's say I live I do live in Cupertino right now. I already know I'm outside your geography, but let's assume I live in Menlo Park. I'm close enough. But let's assume that I have good friends and I can pay for home repairs if I need it. And I could pay for an Uber today to take me to the doctor. How is it different being part of your village than just having good friends and being able to hire people to help you?
I think there's something that I alluded to a little bit before, which is that part of being in the structure of a village makes it easier to seek out support. You may have great friends, but you may not feel like you want to call them if you need something. But if you know that you're a part of a village which exists to offer those resources and support, it makes it a little easier. And then I would also say, yes, you can pay for your home repairs, but do you know who to call? Do you know who's a reliable provider for that service. The village has the list of vendors that can make it much easier for you to select an appropriate service provider. So I would say, even if you feel like there are certain areas where you're pretty comfortable, pretty good, also you have a gardener, but what if they retire? How are you going to find the next one? So I think there's always small ways that the village can enhance your experience as you are getting older.
And it sounds like no matter what the model is, and we're seeing two of them. There's 300 villages across the country. There's always this really this emphasis on this kind of a community and supporting one another. It sounds like that's like really kind of the mission behind it. Am I right with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, my last question for each of you. Sue, I'm going to start with you. What do people love most about being part of your villages?
Um, I think it's belonging to a community, but a community of other older adults who are aging together, facing challenges, joys, but that commonality of experience is really unique. I think, yeah, it's finding a place where you feel, I've said this before, but where you feel known, where you feel uh, valued and cared for, and where you have purpose to give back. There's also kind of a confidence and trust, I think, that is a big part of belonging to the village. There's someone you can turn to when you need support. And Sally, you mentioned many of us have families close at hand and or support network if we're lucky. A lot of our villagers don't have that. They're aging. Their adult children live at a distance. They may
Yeah,
not have and, there's a whole
yeah,
range.
yeah.
But even when you have some of those support networks, it's just there's a certain sense of independence as well about being able to turn to the village alongside those other supports, and you don't feel as much a burden as you can when your needs are greater. So,
Yeah, this is
compliment.
great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Erica, my question for you is what do you love most about your job? Because you seem pretty excited about the work you do.
I can't hardly wait to answer. I just think the people are wonderful. The people who are attracted to this model are those who really have a sense of the importance of community. And my role to be able to help to develop the community and to make it more responsive to people's needs has just been a joy over the years.
Thank you. So Chuck, come back on camera. We are going to go to the Q&A, and if you have a specific question for Chuck, you can let him know that. Let me go ahead and take a look at our questions. Okay. So Margot, hello, Margot. She asked she'd like to find out more about the village model in other countries, for example, Canada. And we have a lot of people from Canada here. I don't know, Chuck, is that one for you? Do you know about Canada?
I'm not aware of something comparable to the village movement in other countries. There may be something similar to it, but it seems to have been a U.S. phenomenon as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, oh yeah, Sue, do you
I
have
was
the
just
thought?
going to say the best resource, I'm not aware either, but would be to contact the Village to Village Network. That's our national umbrella. And they would, if they're like efforts elsewhere, they probably would be aware of that.
Yeah, but for
And
example, I have not seen them publicize any kind of international.
Yeah, I haven't either.
And I suspect it has to do with very different healthcare systems in different countries and the way things are paid for and all that. So I think
Mhm.
it may be primarily a US phenomenon.
And we're getting a lot of questions about where to find one, how to find one. I will be sending that link. I do have a question, and maybe this is for Chuck. It's kind of like, what if, like in Cupertino, for example, there isn't one where I currently live. if I live somewhere and I think, oh my gosh, like how do we start a village? Is that possible? Is that in the links you gave me, Chuck? That somebody would
Yeah,
be able to do that?
the both the national network and the California network do give assistance to newly forming villages, and you can share a lot of information. You can participate in conferences and things like that, and get a lot of information from their websites. And so that's very much a part of, the whole notion of replicating this model is very much a part of the network.
I would add a few years ago, Village Movement California developed what they call an incubator program. And it's like 8 or 9 modules addressing the different issues you want to think through in starting up a village. And it's such a great resource. They're just extending that nationally. So, if you're very serious and want to jump in, that's probably your best resource.
And again, Chuck, is that in the links I'm going to send people?
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
okay. It's in there. We're going to be sending
Both
that.
the state level and the national level websites are in there, and we'll have access to all that information.
Perfect. So, Sue, somebody asked, what happens if you have tasks that need to be done and you run out of volunteers?
We are incredibly lucky that we don't guarantee when somebody makes a request that we'll fulfill it, but we have like a 2% request rate that we're not able to fill. So we're really lucky, but there's a volunteer engine that just keeps on churning. So last year our volunteers increased by 16%. As I mentioned, 450 volunteers, giving the equivalent of last year of 19,000 hours of service, 9 full-time staff people. So the magnitude of our volunteer base is, what enables us to be able to respond. But that's very similar to other villages that are volunteer driven, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So chances are it's something that's covered. And I'm getting to know you, Sue and Erica, as leaders, and I feel that based on what I know about you, it's like, hey, if we have a need, you're going to find somebody. You're going to figure it out.
Exactly. That's the
Um,
motivation is that if somebody calls us, it doesn't matter what it is, we will do what we can to help them get an answer to that.
yeah, yeah, and that's if I'll just say to the audience with Sue and Erica and Chuck and I have talked a lot before today, so I believe that. I believe you would find an answer there. All right, here's one question, and I think it's a great one from Colleen. She said, do you have data about how well this model serves minoritized populations, people with low health literacy, or how can this model help ensure health equity? I don't know, Erica, Sue, do you want to take that? I know you said you have kind of a sliding scale, but are these villages in places that serve underserved populations?
Do you want to jump in or you want me to?
Um, I was just going to say that villages can form in any community and they can form around the members of that community. And so, in that sense, there's really no limitation to demographics or anything else. But what it does take is a motivated core of people to work on creating that for everybody. What would Sue add?
Well, I would say nationally, villages. So I think almost every village I know has kind of a sliding scale and is inclusive. So they don't
Yes.
turn anybody away because usually there's a whole range of, membership contributions that are made. So in that way, we're inclusive. But we also tend not to be as diverse as we'd like. It's a big topic of
Hmm.
um, discussion and, skill building to really push our villages to be more diverse and representative of the people we serve. We're, making inroads, but it's always, a high priority.
And that's
It's
not,
a sad fact, but it's true. I mean, I think we all aspire to a broader demographic.
yeah. Yeah, thank you for that honest answer. Here's Jill says she loves this model and concept. She said, would it make sense to start with a local senior center and go from there? And I think it's an interesting question because that's kind of what you have with Avenida. So I don't know, Chuck, do you want to answer that one? Because isn't that how that village started?
It very definitely started that way. I mean, when we sent a delegation back to Boston to look at the village model and came back to Palo Alto, and immediately the Avenue Senior Center, which had already been around for 40 years or for 30 years, teamed up with that group and sponsored the existence of the formation of a village. That doesn't always exist. That opportunity doesn't always exist. So, you need to be able to operate without a senior center if there's not one handy. But what a senior center can buy you is it relieves a lot of the administrative burden. They're already set up as a nonprofit. They already have accounting and tax returns and things like that. And so it just can relieve you of a lot of the administrative hassles of trying to set up your own organization.
Thank you.
I would jump in and say, while we're not a project of a senior center, I mean, it's a fantastic avenue. We also have, I mean, if you're thinking about starting a village, connect with your local senior centers
Absolutely.
right away because we have very tight relationships. They provide us space. Our offices, we have free of charges in a local community center or senior center. They're, a logical connecting point for
Yeah, it's a
support.
natural alliance,
Yeah.
definitely.
We are at time. We could keep chatting, but I'm going to let everyone go. I will be sending the resources, a PDF of the slides today. Um, Thank you, Erica, Sue, and Chuck, for just a really fascinating and useful presentation today.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having
Thank
us.
you for having us.